England, 1847. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the drawing-room of Havenworth Estate as Helena Ashworth stared out the window, watching raindrops trace delicate patterns on the glass. The verdant Hampshire countryside stretched before her, a landscape of rolling hills and ancient oaks that had been her sanctuary for all her 20 years. She traced the spine of her leather-bound book with slender fingers, savouring what might be her last moments of peaceful solitude for months to come. "Helena, dear, are you listening?" Her mother's voice, tinged with exasperation, pulled her from her reverie. Lady Catherine Ashworth sat primly on the settee, a letter clutched in her gloved hand, her posture as rigid as the social conventions she upheld. "Lady Harrington's invitation has arrived. We depart for London in a fortnight." Helena turned from the window, her heart sinking. "Must I truly participate in this parade? I have no desire to be displayed like cattle at market." "Helena Elizabeth Ashworth!" Her mother's cheeks flushed with indignation. "Such improper language. This is precisely why you need a season in London. Your father and I have indulged your peculiarities for far too long." Sir William Ashworth lowered his newspaper with a sigh. Though a gentle soul at heart, he had finally yielded to his wife's insistence that their daughter needed to secure a suitable match. "Your mother is right, Helena," he said, his tone conciliatory. "At 20, you should have been married years ago. Your younger sister Sophia will debut next year. It would be most irregular if you weren't settled first." "I am perfectly content with my books and our countryside," Helena protested. "Must happiness always be tied to marriage?" Lady Catherine rose, smoothing her skirts with practiced precision. "In our world, my dear, it certainly is, particularly for a young woman with no fortune to speak of." This was the painful truth that Helena could not escape. The Ashworth estate, while respectable, was entailed to a distant cousin. Her father's investments had suffered losses, leaving his daughters with modest dowries that required the augmentation of advantageous matches. "Your cousin Eleanor will accompany us," Lady Catherine continued. "Her connections to the Dowager Duchess of Westmoreland will open doors that would otherwise remain closed to us." Helena bit her lip to prevent a retort. Cousin Eleanor, 5 years her senior and still unmarried, was a perpetual reminder of what awaited women who failed to secure a husband: a life of dependency, shuttled between relatives who viewed them as burdens. "I shall do my duty," Helena finally conceded, though her eyes betrayed her reluctance. "But I make no promises beyond proper decorum." "That is all we ask," her father said kindly, returning to his newspaper. "For now." 2 weeks later, London's elegant Berkeley Square buzzed with activity as the Ashworth carriage pulled up before their rented townhouse. Helena descended reluctantly, taking in the stately facades and the carefully manicured garden at the square's centre, so different from the wild beauty of Hampshire. "Stand straight, dear," Lady Catherine murmured as footmen unloaded their trunks. "One never knows who might be observing." The observation proved prescient. Across the square, from the window of an imposing townhouse, a pair of piercing blue eyes indeed watched their arrival with sudden interest. Arthur Fairmont, the Duke of Ashbourne, lounged in his study, a glass of brandy in hand despite the early hour. At 32, he was the most eligible bachelor in London, wealthy, titled, and breathtakingly handsome with his raven hair and aristocratic features. He was also, by his own admission, thoroughly bored. "Who are our new neighbours, Simmons?" he asked his valet, who stood arranging his evening attire. "The Ashworth family of Hampshire, Your Grace. Sir William, his wife, and daughter. They've taken Lord Pembury's house for the season." "Another debutante thrust upon the marriage market, no doubt," Arthur drawled, swirling his brandy. "How predictable." "So it would seem, Your Grace." Simmons responded with practiced neutrality, though he had served his master long enough to recognize the glint of interest in his eyes, a dangerous sign for any young lady in Arthur's vicinity. His closest friend, Lord Henry Russell, sprawled in a nearby chair, raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're considering adding another conquest to your extensive collection, Arthur. Wasn't Lady Beatrice Fenton enough of a diversion last season?" Arthur's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Lady Beatrice became tediously besotted. They all do eventually." "Perhaps because you encourage such devotion before discarding them," Henry observed dryly. "I make no promises I don't intend to keep," Arthur countered, rising to stand by the window again. His gaze lingered on the slender figure of Helena as she paused to look up at the London sky. Even from a distance, he could see a certain defiance in her posture that separated her from the usual simpering debutantes. This one seems different, he mused. Less eager. A challenge, perhaps. Lord Henry groaned. Heavens, Arthur, must you always view women as conquests? Some men do marry for affection, you know. And those men are fools, Arthur replied sharply, memories of his parents' disastrous union darkening his expression. Marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. Love is a convenient fiction invented by poets and embraced by the weak-minded. He turned from the window, his decision made. I believe I shall attend Lady Harrington's ball tomorrow evening after all, Henry. It seems the season may prove less tedious than anticipated. I may heaven help that poor girl, Henry muttered under his breath. Lady Harrington's ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles, illuminating the cream of London society in their finery. Helena stood at the periphery, a vision in pale blue silk that complemented her chestnut hair and hazel eyes, though her expression betrayed her discomfort. Smile, Helena, Cousin Eleanor hissed beside her. You look as though you're attending an execution rather than a ball. The difference seems merely academic, Helena replied quietly, earning a sharp look from her mother who conversed nearby with Lady Harrington. Her attention was suddenly drawn to a stir at the ballroom entrance. Conversations quieted momentarily as a tall, imposing figure arrived. Even without the announced title, Helena would have recognized nobility in his bearing, in the casual confidence with which he surveyed the room. The Duke of Ashbourne, Eleanor whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Arthur Fairmont, the most eligible bachelor in England, obscenely wealthy, devastatingly handsome, and utterly unattainable. Helena watched as women young and old preened under his passing gaze. He seems well aware of his appeal, she observed coolly. Naturally. They say he's left a trail of broken hearts across London. No woman has managed to secure his interest beyond a fleeting dalliance. Something in Eleanor's tone made Helena glance at her cousin sharply. You sound as though you speak from experience. A flush crept up Eleanor's neck. Hardly. I merely repeat society gossip. Before Helena could press further, Lady Catherine appeared at her elbow, her eyes alight with ambition. Lord Harrington is bringing the Duke of Ashbourne to make our acquaintance, she whispered urgently. Stand up straight, Helena, and for goodness sake mind your sharp tongue. Helena had barely time to compose herself before the Duke stood before them, his tall frame resplendent in formal black evening wear that contrasted sharply with his white linen and azure waistcoat, a shade that matched his penetrating eyes. Your Grace, may I present Sir William Ashworth, his wife Lady Catherine, and their daughter, Miss Helena Ashworth, Lord Harrington intoned. The Duke bowed elegantly. When he straightened, his gaze locked with Helena's, and she felt an unexpected jolt of something she could not name. Miss Ashworth, he said, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to resonate through her very bones. Welcome to London. Thank you, Your Grace, she replied evenly, determined not to betray the inexplicable fluttering in her chest. Though I confess, I find city life somewhat overwhelming after the peace of the countryside. A spark of genuine interest lit his eyes. You prefer rural pursuits, then? I prefer genuine conversation to practiced flattery, Your Grace, she replied before she could stop herself. Something I fear is in short supply in London drawing-rooms. Lady Catherine's horrified gasp was drowned by the Duke's sudden laugh, a sound so genuine it transformed his face, softening the aristocratic angles into something dangerously appealing. Refreshingly direct, he commented, his eyes never leaving hers. A rare quality indeed. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and with a smile that had conquered countless hearts, he extended his hand. Would you do me the honor, Miss Ashworth? Aware of her mother's eager nod and the envious stares of every unmarried woman in the vicinity, Helena reluctantly placed her gloved hand in his. As you wish, Your Grace. As he led her onto the dance floor, Helena steeled herself against his charm. She had read enough novels to recognize a practiced seducer when she encountered one. What she could not anticipate was how her body would betray her, how naturally she would follow his lead, how dangerously right it would feel within the circle of his arms. You dance beautifully, he murmured as they whirled amid the other couples. As do most young ladies who have endured countless hours of instruction, she replied. It is hardly a distinguishing talent. His lips quirked. Do you deliberately seek to diminish yourself, or is it merely that you are immune to compliments? Neither, Your Grace. I simply prefer honest observation to empty flattery. Arthur, he corrected, pulling her fractionally closer than propriety strictly allowed. My friends call me Arthur. Are we friends, then? She challenged. We have only just met. His smile deepened, revealing a disarming dimple in his left cheek. Not yet, perhaps. But I have a feeling, Miss Ashworth, that you and I shall become very well acquainted indeed. The certainty in his tone sent a shiver of warning down Helena's spine. As the music drew to a close, she curtsied deeply, avoiding the intensity of his gaze. I think not, Your Grace, she replied softly. I have no interest in becoming another notch on your bedpost of conquests. His eyes widened in genuine surprise, then narrowed with renewed interest as she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone on the dance floor. The Duke of Ashbourne watched her retreating figure with a mixture of astonishment and growing determination. The hunt, it seemed, had begun. The following week saw London society ablaze with speculation. The notorious Duke of Ashbourne, previously indifferent to the season's offerings, suddenly appeared at every event the Ashworth family attended. His attentions to Helena were marked enough to prompt gossip, yet sufficiently restrained to avoid committing himself. For Helena, each encounter was a battle of wits that left her simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. Though she maintained her guard, she could not deny the Duke's formidable charm. Behind his practiced gallantry, she occasionally glimpsed something genuine, a sharp intelligence, a dry wit that matched her own, moments of surprising insight that made her question her assumptions. He's toying with you, Eleanor warned one afternoon as they returned from a promenade in Hyde Park, where Arthur had coincidentally encountered them and escorted Helena for a turn about the paths, much to Lady Catherine's poorly disguised delight. This is how it begins. He singles out a woman, makes her feel special, different from the others, and then once conquered moves on to the next challenge. You need not concern yourself, Helena replied, removing her bonnet with more force than necessary. I harbour no illusions about the Duke's character or intentions. Yet that evening, as she prepared for Lady Winfield's musical soirée, Helena found herself taking unusual care with her appearance, selecting an emerald gown that enhanced the golden flecks in her hazel eyes. How lovely you look, her mother approved, fastening a modest pearl necklace around Helena's throat. The Duke seemed most attentive yesterday. Your father has heard whispers that he might be prepared to settle at last. Mother, please, Helena protested. He is merely amusing himself. I am nothing more than a temporary diversion. Lady Catherine patted her cheek. All men need the right woman to tame them, dear, even notorious rakes like the Duke of Ashbourne. The soirée proved to be a tedious affair, with mediocre performances endured with polite enthusiasm. Helena was relieved when the musical portion concluded and guests dispersed for refreshments. She had just secured a quiet corner when a familiar voice addressed her. You appear as thrilled by Miss Livingston's rendition of Mozart as I felt, Arthur observed dryly, materializing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one to Helena, who accepted it cautiously. I would never criticize another's artistic efforts, she replied primly. No, but your expression when she missed that high note spoke volumes. His eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. It was precisely the look my piano master wore when I butchered Beethoven as a boy. The image of a young aristocratic Arthur being scolded by a music master made Helena smile despite herself. You play, then? Abominably, he admitted. Unlike you, I suspect. Your hands bear the telltale marks of a pianist. He gestured to her long, elegant fingers. Helena was startled by his observation. How perceptive. Though I play merely for my own pleasure, not for audiences. A private performance, then, he suggested, his voice lowering intimately. I should very much like to hear you play. The implication hung between them, and Helena felt warmth creep up her neck. Your Grace. Arthur, he corrected again. Your Grace, she repeated firmly. I must know your intentions. Your reputation precedes you, and I have no desire to become another in your long line of conquests. For a moment, something like genuine regret flickered across his features. Then his practiced charm reasserted itself. My intentions, at present merely to enjoy your company, Miss Ashworth. You are refreshingly unlike the typical London debutante. Because I do not simper and bat my eyelashes at your every word, she challenged. His laugh was startlingly genuine. Precisely. You see me too clearly for comfort, I fear. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Lady Beatrice Fenton, a stunning blonde whose calculating smile did not reach her eyes. Your Grace, she purred, placing a possessive hand on Arthur's arm. How neglectful you've been. I've scarcely seen you this season. Lady Beatrice. Arthur's tone cooled noticeably. May I present Miss Helena Ashworth? Lady Beatrice assessed Helena with a dismissive glance. Charmed, I'm sure. Your Grace, I simply must secure your opinion on the new painting in the gallery. Lord Winfield acquired it directly from Paris. With an apologetic glance at Helena, Arthur allowed himself to be led away. Helena watched them go, noting the intimate way Lady Beatrice leaned into him, the practiced tilt of her head as she gazed up at him. He was hers last season, came a soft voice beside Helena. She turned to find Lady Caroline Hartley, a kind-faced woman several years her senior. Before he tired of her, as he inevitably does. I am not surprised, Helena replied, attempting nonchalance. His reputation speaks for itself. Lady Caroline studied her with unexpected sympathy. Take care with your heart, Miss Ashworth. The Duke is charming, to be sure, but he has left a trail of broken hearts across London. Some say he is simply incapable of love. You need not worry on my account, Helena assured her. My heart is quite securely guarded. Yet as the evening progressed, Helena found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Arthur, who now moved through the room with Lady Beatrice on his arm, stopping to converse with various society matrons. Occasionally, his eyes would find Helena's across the crowded room, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Later, as the Ashworth carriage carried them home through London's dark streets, Helena silently chastised herself for her foolishness. The Duke was playing a game, one she refused to lose. The Royal Botanical Gardens provided a welcome respite from London's oppressive social calendar. Helena wandered among exotic blooms with her younger sister Sophia, who had arrived in London the previous day with their aunt. So this is the famous Duke you've written about, Sophia whispered, nodding discreetly toward Arthur, who conversed with a group of gentlemen several yards away. He is rather handsome, isn't he? Handsome and well aware of it, Helena replied. Pay him no mind, Sophia. He is precisely the sort of man our mother warned us about. Yet she seems most eager for his attention to you, Sophia observed shrewdly. I overheard her telling Aunt Harriet that there might be a proposal before the season's end. Helena nearly stumbled on the gravel path. Mother is deluding herself. The Duke has no intention of marrying anyone, least of all me. He's looking at you again, Sophia noted with a giggle. Rather intently, I might add. Indeed, Arthur had broken from his companions and was making his way toward them with purposeful strides. Helena's heart betrayed her with an accelerated beat. Miss Ashworth, he greeted, bowing elegantly. And this must be your sister. The resemblance is remarkable. Sophia curtsied, flushing with pleasure at his attention. Your Grace, Helena has told me so much about you. Has she? His eyes danced with amusement as they met Helena's mortified gaze. All flattering, I trust. Honest, at least, Helena replied evenly. He laughed, the sound warming her despite her best defences. Would you ladies permit me to escort you through the orchid house? It's recently been expanded with specimens from India. Helena was about to decline when Sophia enthusiastically accepted. With no graceful way to refuse, Helena found herself walking beside the Duke, with Sophia tactfully dropping several paces behind to admire the flowers. Your sister is charming, Arthur observed, though she lacks your fire. Sophia is sweetness itself, Helena agreed. Far too good for London society. Unlike yourself, he questioned. I make no claims to sweetness, Your Grace. No, he agreed, his voice softening. You are honey laced with gunpowder, sweet but explosive. The unexpected poetry of his description caught Helena off guard. She glanced up to find him studying her, with an intensity that had nothing of the practiced seducer about it. May I sketch you? He asked abruptly. Helena blinked in surprise. I beg your pardon. I'm an amateur artist, he explained. Something about your profile against these exotic blooms. It would make a striking composition. I wasn't aware the Duke of Ashbourne had artistic inclinations, Helena replied cautiously. "There is much about me you are not aware of, Miss Ashworth." His voice carried a hint of challenge. "Perhaps you might allow me to surprise you." Before she could formulate a response, they were interrupted by the arrival of Lord Henry Russell, who approached with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Ah, Arthur, there you are, ladies." He bowed politely. "I hate to interrupt, but there's a matter requiring your attention." He gestured discreetly to the newspaper. Arthur's expression hardened momentarily. "Of course. Miss Ashworth, Miss Sophia, please excuse me. Duty calls." As he walked away in urgent conversation with Lord Henry, Helena couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders, so different from his usual languid grace. "What do you suppose that was about?" Sophia wondered. "I have no idea," Helena replied truthfully, "and it is none of our concern." Yet she found herself wondering what hidden aspects of Arthur Fairmont might lie beneath his carefully constructed facade. The answer came unexpectedly the following afternoon, when Helena accompanied cousin Eleanor to visit a small charity hospital in one of London's less fashionable districts. Eleanor volunteered there weekly, reading to patients and writing letters for those unable to do so themselves. Helena had just finished reading to an elderly woman when she glanced up to see a familiar tall figure emerging from a private ward, deep in conversation with a doctor. She froze in disbelief. What business could the Duke of Ashbourne possibly have in such a humble establishment? Ducking behind a screen, she watched as Arthur handed the doctor what appeared to be a substantial purse, speaking earnestly about ensuring they receive the best care possible. The doctor nodded gratefully before Arthur turned to leave. Helena quickly made her way to an adjacent corridor, pretending to study a notice board as Arthur passed. He nearly walked by without seeing her before stopping abruptly. "Miss Ashworth?" Genuine surprise coloured his tone. "What brings you to St. Bartholomew's?" "I might ask you the same question, Your Grace," she replied, studying him with new curiosity. "This seems an unusual haunt for a man of your standing." Something guarded flickered in his eyes. "I have certain responsibilities that occasionally bring me here." "Responsibilities or charitable inclinations?" she pressed. His expression became distant, the warmth she had come to expect notably absent. "You presume much, Miss Ashworth." "Forgive me," she said softly. "I did not mean to pry into private matters." The coldness faded from his gaze. "No, I apologize for my curtness. These visits are personal." Helena nodded, respecting his reticence. "I understand. I shall not mention it to anyone." "I would appreciate your discretion," he said, his usual composure returning. "London society has certain expectations of my character that I find convenient to maintain." The implication fascinated her, that he cultivated his rakish reputation deliberately, that there might be depths to Arthur Fairmont beyond the charming libertine he presented to the world. Before she could pursue this intriguing possibility, Eleanor appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of the Duke. "Your Grace," she stammered, curtsying, "I had no idea you were acquainted with St. Bartholomew's." "A passing familiarity only," he replied smoothly. "And now, ladies, I must bid you good day, Miss Ashworth." His eyes held Helena's for a moment longer than necessary. "Until our next meeting." As he strode away, Eleanor clutched Helena's arm. "The Duke of Ashbourne here, what could it mean?" "I'm not certain," Helena replied thoughtfully, "but I suspect there is more to his grace than meets the eye." Lady Rutherford's masquerade ball was the highlight of the London season, an extravagant affair where society's elite concealed their identities behind elaborate masks and costumes. For one night, rigid social conventions relaxed slightly, allowing for encounters that might be impossible under ordinary circumstances. Helena entered the ballroom dressed as Diana the Huntress, her simple white Grecian gown a stark contrast to the elaborate costumes surrounding her. A silver half-mask concealed the upper portion of her face, while her chestnut hair fell in loose waves down her back, a daring departure from proper evening coiffure, permissible only for the masquerade. "You look absolutely scandalous," Sophia whispered delightedly, resplendent herself as a medieval princess. "Mother would have fits if she saw you without your chaperone." "Mother is engaged in whist in the card-room and will never know," Helena replied with uncharacteristic mischief. "And tonight, dear sister, I intend to sample a small taste of freedom." That freedom came sooner than expected. As Sophia was claimed for a dance by a young man dressed as Romeo, Helena found herself approached by a tall figure garbed as a highwayman, his features concealed behind a black domino mask. "The goddess Diana," he observed, his voice instantly recognizable despite his attempt to disguise it. "How fitting." "A highwayman, Your Grace," she countered. "Somewhat on the nose for a man with your reputation." Arthur's laugh was low and intimate. "We are not supposed to recognize each other, Miss Ashworth. That is the point of a masquerade." "Then perhaps you should not have spoken," she suggested. "Your voice betrays you, as does your wit." He extended his hand. "Dance with me, goddess of the hunt." The orchestra had begun a waltz, and Helena found herself swept into his arms with none of the usual formality to buffer their proximity. Through the thin fabric of her costume, she could feel the warmth of his hand at her waist, the controlled strength as he guided her through the steps. "You dance differently tonight," she observed, breathless despite herself. "We are different tonight," he replied, drawing her incrementally closer. "For a few hours we need not be the Duke and the reluctant debutante. We can simply be a man and a woman." The simplicity of his statement struck her. How freeing it would be to set aside the expectations, the constraints of their respective positions, to discover what might exist between them without society's watchful eyes. And what would that man say to that woman, she dared to ask, if titles and reputations were stripped away? His steps slowed as the music built toward its crescendo. He would tell her that she has bewitched him, utterly and completely, that he thinks of her constantly, dreams of her nightly, that she has awakened something in him he believed long dead. The raw honesty in his voice stunned her. This was not the practiced seduction she had come to expect, but something far more dangerous, something that threatened the careful barriers she had constructed against him. And would this man expect the woman to believe such declarations? She whispered. When his history suggests a facility with pretty words meant only to deceive, pain flashed across the visible portion of his face. No, he would expect her skepticism. He has earned it. But he would ask for the chance to prove himself. The music ended, leaving them standing closer than propriety allowed, even at a masquerade. Around them, dancers prepared for the next set, but Helena found herself unable to move, captivated by the intensity radiating from him. "Come with me," he said suddenly, taking her hand. "Just for a moment." Common sense warred with curiosity. The latter won. Helena allowed him to lead her through the French doors onto a secluded terrace, dimly lit by paper lanterns and sheltered from view by potted palms. "We shouldn't be here alone," she said, though she made no move to leave. "No," he agreed, removing his mask. In the soft light, his face appeared younger, vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed. "But I needed to see you, the real you, without disguises between us." Helena hesitated, then slowly removed her own mask. "What is it you wish to say, Your Grace, that requires such privacy?" "Arthur," he corrected gently. "Tonight, of all nights, I would hear my name from your lips." "Arthur," she conceded, the intimacy of his Christian name sending an unexpected thrill through her. He stepped closer, close enough that she could detect the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth emanating from his body. "Helena," he said, her name a caress. "From the moment we met, you have challenged me, confounded me, seen through the carefully constructed facade I present to the world. You are unlike any woman I have ever known." "Pretty words," she murmured, though her heart raced traitorously. "Not pretty. True." He reached up to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I began pursuing you as a game, I confess it, another conquest for my vanity. But somewhere along the way, the hunter became the hunted." She should step away. She should remind him of his reputation, of Lady Beatrice and countless others. She should protect her heart. She did none of these things. "What are you saying?" she asked instead, her voice scarcely audible. "I am saying that I find myself in the unprecedented position of genuinely caring for a woman. It is most inconvenient," he added with a shadow of his usual sardonic humor. "For a man who prides himself on avoiding attachments, I imagine it must be," she replied, fighting to maintain her composure. "Terrifying, in fact," he admitted with startling candor. "I have spent my adult life avoiding precisely this vulnerability." Before she could respond, he cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle yet electric. "May I kiss you, Helena Ashworth?" 1,000 reasons to refuse clamored in her mind. One overwhelming desire silenced them all. "Yes," she breathed. His lips met hers with exquisite tenderness, a kiss unlike any she had imagined in her innocent dreams. It was reverent, questioning, the kiss of a man uncertain of his welcome, not the practiced seduction of a notorious rake. When he drew back, the wonder in his eyes mirrored her own tumultuous emotions. For one suspended moment, Helena believed in the possibility of transformation, in the idea that even the most hardened heart could change. Then reality intruded in the form of approaching voices. They stepped apart hastily, donning their masks as other guests spilled onto the terrace. "I should return," Helena whispered. "My absence will be noticed." Arthur nodded, though reluctance was evident in every line of his body. "This conversation is not finished, Helena." "No," she agreed, her lips still tingling from his kiss. "I suppose it is not." As she slipped back into the ballroom, Helena knew with bone-deep certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them, and that the game they played had become infinitely more dangerous. The following week brought relentless rain to London, matching Helena's turbulent emotions. Since the masquerade, Arthur had been conspicuously absent from society events, his withdrawal as noticeable as his previous attention had been. "Perhaps he's finally grown bored," Eleanor suggested, as they arranged flowers in the drawing room. Men like the Duke are creatures of impulse. Once the challenge fades, so does their interest. Helena concentrated on trimming rose stems, unwilling to reveal how deeply Eleanor's casual assessment wounded her. Had their moment on the terrace meant nothing? Had she imagined the sincerity in his eyes, in his touch? "It matters not," she replied with forced nonchalance. "I have received an invitation to Lady Westmoreland's country house party next week. Mother believes Sir Edward Bancroft will be in attendance." "Ah," Eleanor nodded approvingly. "A most suitable match. Perhaps not as exciting as a duke, but Sir Edward is steady, respectable, and his estate borders your father's lands. Very convenient." The description, though accurate, filled Helena with inexplicable melancholy. Steady, respectable, convenient. Was that truly all she could hope for? A commotion in the hallway interrupted her thoughts. Moments later, the butler appeared with a silver tray bearing an elegant envelope. "A message for Miss Ashworth," he announced, "delivered by the Duke of Ashbourne's personal footman." Helena's fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope, ignoring Eleanor's significant look. She broke the ducal seal and unfolded the single sheet within. "Miss Ashworth, I write to offer my most sincere apologies for my abrupt disappearance. Urgent business called me to my estate in Derbyshire, a matter involving tenants affected by the recent storms. I would be honoured if you would permit me to escort you on a drive through Hyde Park tomorrow at 2 o'clock, weather permitting. There are matters of importance I wish to discuss. Your servant, Ashbourne." "Well?" Eleanor prompted when Helena remained silent. "His Grace wishes to take me driving tomorrow," Helena replied, carefully refolding the note. "And will you accept?" Eleanor's tone was carefully neutral, though her expression betrayed concern. Helena hesitated. Common sense dictated refusal. Her heart argued otherwise. "Yes," she decided. "I believe I shall." The following afternoon brought unexpected sunshine, the rain-washed park gleaming with renewed vibrancy as Arthur's open curricle bowled along the fashionable drives of Hyde Park. Helena sat beside him, acutely aware of the attention they attracted from other pleasure-seekers. "You've caused quite a stir with your absence," she observed, nodding to acquaintances they passed. "Lady Rutherford was most disappointed by your failure to appear at her musicale." "I doubt my presence was truly missed," he replied, expertly handling the pair of matched greys. "London society is easily distracted by the next scandal or on dit." "Then you underestimate your impact, Your Grace." "Arthur," he corrected, glancing at her with unexpected earnestness. "After what passed between us at the masquerade, I would hope we might dispense with formalities, at least in private." The reference to their kiss brought heat to Helena's cheeks. "Is that why you requested this drive? To discuss what happened at Lady Rutherford's?" "Partly," he admitted, guiding the horses toward a less crowded path. "Though I confess, I have found myself uncharacteristically tongue-tied now that you are actually here beside me." His admission, so at odds with his usual smooth confidence, touched something in Helena. "You mentioned urgent business at your estate," she prompted gently. Gratitude flickered in his eyes at the safer topic. Yes. The village of Ashbourne was badly flooded in the recent storms. Several tenant families lost their homes. I went to oversee the rebuilding efforts personally. That was unexpectedly conscientious, Helena observed. A shadow crossed his face. My father viewed tenants as mere sources of income. Their welfare was of no concern to him, Arthur continued, his voice hardening. I vowed never to follow his example. Helena studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw. You rarely speak of your father. With good reason. He was silent for a moment, then added quietly, he was not a man worthy of emulation. My mother suffered greatly under his care. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, offering a glimpse into wounds Helena had not previously suspected. Is that why... She hesitated, uncertain whether to proceed. Why I avoid entanglements? He finished for her, his insight surprising her. Partly, yes. I witnessed firsthand how marriage can destroy what begins as love. My father married my mother for her fortune, then proceeded to break her spirit systematically over 20 years of neglect and cruelty. Not all marriages are like that, Helena said softly. No, he conceded. Your parents seem genuinely content. Mine might have been as well, had my father been capable of love. He guided the curricle to a secluded spot beneath a canopy of elms and brought the horses to a halt. For a moment he simply sat, staring ahead as though gathering his thoughts. The night of the masquerade, he finally said, turning to face her. I spoke more honestly than I have to any woman. What I did not tell you is how thoroughly you have disrupted my carefully ordered existence. Helena's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. I have spent years perfecting the art of superficial charm, of keeping everyone at a safe distance, he continued. Then you appeared, refusing to be impressed, seeing through my practiced facade, challenging me at every turn. I merely spoke my mind, she said. Exactly. His smile held a touch of self-deprecation. No simpering, no strategic flattery, just honest reactions that made me want to discover the real woman behind those remarkable hazel eyes. He reached for her gloved hand, his touch sending warmth through her, despite the layers of fabric between them. Helena, I need to know if what I felt on that terrace was merely the enchantment of the masquerade, or if you might possibly return even a fraction of the regard I have developed for you. The vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. This was not the practiced seducer, but a man laying his heart bare before her. I have tried very hard not to care for you, she admitted. Your reputation is partly deserved and partly cultivated, he interrupted. I have been selfish, Helena. I have pursued pleasure without consideration for consequences, but I have never lied about my intentions, never promised more than I was prepared to give. And what are your intentions now? She asked, her heart pounding. Arthur's eyes held hers with unwavering steadiness. I find myself contemplating possibilities I have spent my adult life avoiding. When I think of the future, it is your face I see beside me. Arthur, she began, overwhelmed by his declaration. I am not asking for an answer today, he assured her quickly. Only the chance to court you properly, to prove that what I feel is genuine, not merely another conquest. Helena considered his words carefully, weighing the risk against the growing certainty in her own heart. I would be amenable to that, she finally said. The relief that washed over his features was palpable. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Thank you, he said simply. As they resumed their drive, conversation flowing more easily between them, Helena felt herself daring to hope. Perhaps the notorious Duke of Ashbourne was indeed capable of transformation, and perhaps she was the woman to inspire it. Society watched with avid interest as the Duke's attentions to Miss Ashworth continued in the weeks that followed. Where once he had scattered his charm indiscriminately, he now focused solely on Helena, escorting her to exhibitions, securing the seat beside hers at dinners, bringing her thoughtfully selected books that spoke to her interests. Lady Catherine was beside herself with delight, already envisioning her daughter as a duchess. Sir William remained cautiously optimistic, though he quietly arranged inquiries into the Duke's financial affairs and character. All reports confirm his wealth is substantial and well managed, he informed Helena one evening, as they sat alone in the library. And despite his reputation with the ladies, he is known to be fair with his tenants and generous with his charities. You have been investigating him, Papa, Helena asked, half amused, half mortified. "It is my duty as your father," he replied without apology, "especially when the gentleman in question has such a colourful history." Helena toyed with the ribbon of her book. "Do you believe people can change, Papa?" Sir William considered the question thoughtfully. "I believe they can, under the right circumstances. The question is whether such change can be sustained when the initial inspiration fades." His words lingered in Helena's mind days later as she prepared for Lady Westmoreland's country house party. The invitation had been extended to include Arthur as well, a clear indication of society's acceptance of their courtship. "I still don't trust him," Eleanor confided as they packed their trunks. "Men like the Duke do not simply transform overnight. Be careful, Helena. The higher your expectations rise, the farther you have to fall." "Your concern is noted," Helena replied, unwilling to reveal her own lingering doubts. "But I believe Arthur deserves the opportunity to prove himself." The Westmoreland estate, Briarwood Hall, was a stately Tudor manor set amid magnificent gardens and ancient woodlands. Helena found herself assigned a charming bedchamber overlooking the rose garden, while Arthur and the other gentlemen were housed in a separate wing. "Miss Ashworth," Lady Westmoreland greeted her warmly at dinner the first evening, "we have placed you beside Sir Edward Bancroft. I believe your estates are neighbours in Hampshire." Helena glanced at the seating arrangement with dismay, noting that Arthur had been positioned at the opposite end of the table beside Lady Beatrice Fenton, whose arrival that afternoon had been unexpected. "Lady Westmoreland is quite the matchmaker," Sir Edward remarked as he held her chair. A pleasant-faced gentleman of perhaps 35, he had kind eyes and impeccable manners, though I fear her efforts may be wasted, given the Duke's apparent interest. "You are very understanding, Sir Edward," Helena replied gratefully. "Not at all. I've known Arthur since our Oxford days," he confided. "He was always the dashing one, while I was content with my books. But I will say this, I have never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you." Helena's gaze drifted down the table to where Arthur sat, his expression carefully neutral as Lady Beatrice leaned close, whispering something in his ear. As though sensing her attention, he looked up, his eyes finding hers with such naked longing that she felt her breath catch. "Yes," Sir Edward murmured, noting the exchange, "exactly like that." The evening progressed pleasantly enough, though Helena found herself repeatedly distracted by the sight of Arthur and Lady Beatrice in seemingly intimate conversation. When the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, leaving the gentlemen to their port, Lady Beatrice made a point of settling beside Helena on a small settee. "The Duke seems in fine spirits tonight," she observed, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It reminds me of how attentive he was during our association last season." Helena maintained her composure with effort. "His Grace is unfailingly courteous to all." "Oh, it was considerably more than courtesy, I assure you," Lady Beatrice replied with deliberate emphasis. "Arthur can be quite passionate when properly inspired." The familiar use of his Christian name was clearly calculated to wound. Helena refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "How fortunate that you have such pleasant memories to sustain you," she replied evenly. Lady Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "You are naive if you believe you've changed him, Miss Ashworth. Arthur Fairmont pursues what challenges him, conquers it, and moves on. It is his nature." "Perhaps you mistake familiarity for insight, Lady Beatrice," Helena countered softly. "People are seldom as simple as we wish to believe." Before Lady Beatrice could respond, the gentleman rejoined them, Arthur making his way directly to Helena's side. "Would you honour me with a song, Miss Ashworth?" he asked, gesturing toward the pianoforte. "Sir Edward tells me you play beautifully." Grateful for the escape, Helena allowed him to lead her to the instrument. As she settled on the bench, he leaned close, ostensibly to arrange her music. "I apologize for Lady Westmoreland's seating arrangements," he murmured. "I suspect Lady Beatrice had a hand in them." "It is of no consequence," Helena replied, though his acknowledgment soothed her unspoken concerns. "Your equanimity is admirable, but unnecessary," he said with a wry smile. "I observed your conversation with her just now. Whatever she said, please know that my past is precisely that, past." The simple sincerity in his eyes steadied her. Helena began to play, a delicate Mozart sonata that filled the drawing-room with crystalline notes. When she concluded, Arthur's applause led the others. his expression one of genuine appreciation rather than mere politeness. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with card games and conversation keeping the party entertained until the ladies retired. As Helena ascended the grand staircase, a small folded note was pressed into her hand by a passing footman. In the privacy of her chamber, she unfolded it to find Arthur's bold handwriting. "Meet me in the rose garden at dawn. I have something important to ask you. Yours." Helena's heart raced as she contemplated the invitation. Propriety dictated refusal. Her heart urged acceptance. After a night of fitful sleep, she rose with the first light, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the early morning chill. The rose garden was silent, save for birdsong, the blooms heavy with dew as Helena made her way along the gravel paths. Arthur stood beside a marble fountain at the garden's centre, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. He turned at her approach, his face lighting with a smile that dispelled her lingering doubts. "You came," he said softly. "Against my better judgment," she replied, though she couldn't suppress an answering smile. "I seem to inspire that reaction in you frequently," he observed, taking her hands in his. "Helena, I've brought you here because I can no longer keep my feelings contained within the bounds of proper society." The intensity in his gaze made her tremble slightly. "Arthur, please, let me speak," he interrupted gently. "All my life, I have guarded myself against genuine emotion. My parents' unhappy union taught me that love was a weakness to be avoided at all costs. I built walls, cultivated a reputation that kept expectations low and entanglements temporary." He released one of her hands to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "Then you appeared, this remarkable woman who saw through my careful facade, who challenged me, frustrated me, fascinated me, who made me want to be worthy of her regard." Helena's breath caught as he slowly knelt before her, still holding her hand. "I know I am not the man you deserve. My past is checkered, to say the least. But if you would grant me the honor of becoming my wife, I swear to you that every day of our life together would be dedicated to earning the trust you place in me." Tears blurred her vision as she gazed down at him, this proud man humbled by love. "Arthur, are you certain? Marriage is not a game from which you can withdraw when it ceases to amuse." "I have never been more certain of anything," he replied with absolute conviction. "I love you, Helena Ashworth, completely and irrevocably." The simple declaration, spoken without flourish or artifice, reached the core of her being. "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Joy transformed his face as he rose, drawing her into his arms with exquisite tenderness. His kiss was a promise, a pledge of devotion that left no room for doubt. When they finally parted, Arthur pressed his forehead to hers. "You have my heart, Helena. Guard it well, for it has never belonged to another." As the sun rose fully above the horizon, casting golden light across the dewy garden, Helena allowed herself to believe in the miracle of transformation, in the power of love, to redeem even the most guarded heart. The announcement of their engagement sent ripples of astonishment through London society. The notorious Duke of Ashbourne tamed at last. Speculation ran rampant, wagers were settled, and congratulations, some sincere, others decidedly less so, poured in from every quarter. "A June wedding," Lady Catherine declared, already deep in preparations despite Helena's protests that a longer engagement might be prudent. "At St. George's, Hanover Square, of course. Nothing less would be suitable for a future duchess." Helena found herself swept along in a whirlwind of fittings, consultations, and social obligations. Through it all, Arthur remained a steady presence, his devotion evident in every glance, every touch, every thoughtful gesture. Only one shadow marred their happiness. Lady Beatrice Fenton had not gracefully accepted defeat. At every opportunity she appeared at Arthur's side, reminiscing about shared experiences, touching his arm with familiar intimacy, creating precisely the impression of ongoing attachment that would wound Helena most deeply. "Ignore her," Lord Henry advised Helena during a garden party at Richmond. She did the same with Arthur's previous interests. The woman cannot bear to be supplanted. "Previous interests," Helena repeated, the phrase landing like a stone in her stomach. "There have been many, I suppose." Lord Henry winced, realizing his misstep. "Forgive me, Miss Ashworth. I spoke without thinking." No, you spoke honestly, she replied, and I prefer honesty, however uncomfortable. She glanced across the lawn to where Arthur conversed with several gentlemen, his expression animated as he discussed some topic that clearly engaged his interest. The sight of him, so handsome, so vital, reminded her of the improbability of their match. You doubt him, Lord Henry observed quietly. Helena sighed. Not him, precisely. Rather, I question the ability of anyone to change so fundamentally in so short a time. If it brings you comfort, Lord Henry said after a moment's consideration, I have known Arthur since we were boys at Eton. Behind the facade he presents to society, there has always been a man of principle and depth. Your influence hasn't created something new so much as uncovered what was hidden. His perspective offered Helena genuine reassurance until the following afternoon, when she arrived unexpectedly at Arthur's London residence to consult him about wedding arrangements. His Grace is not at home, Miss Ashworth, his butler informed her with evident discomfort. I see, Helena replied, turning to leave. Please inform him I called. She was halfway down the steps when the butler added, I believe the Duke mentioned attending to business in Mayfair today. Something in his tone gave her pause. Thank you, Simmons. That is most helpful. Acting on an impulse she would later struggle to explain, Helena directed her coachman to drive past Lady Beatrice's Mayfair residence. As they approached, she glimpsed a familiar figure descending the steps of the elegant townhouse. Arthur, his expression grave as he strode to his waiting carriage. Cold dread settled in Helena's stomach. What legitimate business could he possibly have with Lady Beatrice? The most obvious explanation was the one she had feared since their engagement, that Arthur's transformation was temporary, his rakish nature merely dormant, not reformed. She returned home in turmoil, oscillating between trust and suspicion, faith and doubt. When Arthur called that evening, she greeted him with careful neutrality, searching his face for signs of deception. You seem troubled, he observed as they sat in the drawing-room under Lady Catherine's distant but watchful eye. Has something upset you? Helena hesitated, then decided directness was the only path forward. I called at your residence today. Your butler mentioned you were in Mayfair. A flicker of something, guilt, crossed his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. Yes, I had business there. With Lady Beatrice? She asked quietly. His surprise appeared genuine. You saw me? Leaving her residence, yes, Helena confirmed, her heart sinking at his non-denial. Arthur glanced toward Lady Catherine, then lowered his voice. I cannot explain here, Helena, but I swear to you, it was not what you fear. Then what was it? She pressed. A matter requiring discretion, he replied, frustration evident in his tone. I ask for your trust just until tomorrow evening. All will be made clear then, I promise you. Helena wanted desperately to believe him, but the spectre of his past loomed large between them. Trust is difficult when secrecy surrounds actions that appear compromising. Pain flashed in his eyes. Do you truly believe me capable of betraying you, after everything we have shared? Her silence was answer enough. I see. He rose stiffly, his composure masking deeper hurt. Until tomorrow evening, then, I had hoped. But no matter. You shall have your explanation. He bowed formally and took his leave, leaving Helena with the sickening feeling that she had damaged something precious through her suspicion. The invitation to dine at Arthur's London residence the following evening arrived with a bouquet of white roses, Helena's favourite. Lady Catherine insisted on accompanying her, propriety demanding a chaperone until the wedding, now just 3 weeks away. Arthur greeted them with impeccable courtesy, though Helena detected strain beneath his polished manners. Throughout dinner, he maintained engaging conversation with Lady Catherine, while exchanging only the most necessary words with Helena herself. As they retired to the drawing-room for tea, a footman appeared with a message for Lady Catherine. After reading it, she looked up with evident dismay. It seems your father has taken ill, Helena, she announced. Nothing serious according to Dr. Wilson, but he requests my presence. We should return home immediately, Helena began, rising. That won't be necessary, Arthur interjected smoothly. I've taken the liberty of having my carriage prepared for Lady Catherine. Miss Ashworth can follow later in a separate carriage with proper attendants. Lady Catherine hesitated, torn between propriety and practicality. I suppose that would be acceptable given the circumstances. But Helena must not remain unchaperoned for long. Of course not, Arthur assured her. My housekeeper, Mrs. Bailey, will attend Miss Ashworth until her departure, and Lord Henry Russell will be joining us shortly. Once Lady Catherine had departed, an uncomfortable silence descended upon the drawing-room. Helena stood by the fireplace, acutely aware of Arthur's presence as he poured brandy at a side table. I owe you an explanation, he finally said, turning to face her. Regarding Lady Beatrice. Yes, Helena agreed, steeling herself for revelations she dreaded. My visit to her was indeed on a matter of business, he began, his expression grave. Specifically, the recovery of certain correspondence. Helena frowned in confusion. Correspondence? Letters I wrote to her during our brief association last season, he clarified, discomfort evident in his posture. Letters that contained expressions of sentiment that were not entirely sincere, but which might cause pain if read by certain parties. Understanding dawned slowly. You were retrieving love letters you had written to her. Yes, he admitted, but not for the reason you might think. Lady Beatrice threatened to send them to you, to sow doubt between us. Helena absorbed this information carefully. And you believed such letters would accomplish that goal? I feared they might, he replied honestly. The man who wrote those letters was not one I am proud to have been. Selfish, cynical, incapable of genuine feeling. I did not wish you to see that version of me, especially presented through Lady Beatrice's vindictive lens. The explanation was plausible, yet something in his manner suggested he withheld some part of the truth. Was that the only reason for your visit? Arthur hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. No, he admitted. There was another matter, one I had hoped to present differently. He crossed to a writing desk and withdrew a small leather portfolio. This is what truly took me to Lady Beatrice's home. Helena accepted the portfolio with puzzlement, opening it to reveal several folded documents. As she scanned the first page, her confusion deepened. These appear to be property deeds. They are, Arthur confirmed, to a cottage in Kent, the childhood home of Mrs. Rebecca Clark. The name meant nothing to Helena. I don't understand. Mrs. Clark was Lady Beatrice's lady's maid until last year, he explained. When she discovered she was with child, Lady Beatrice dismissed her without reference or wages. Horror filled Helena. That is unconscionable. Indeed. The father of the child was a gentleman of Lady Beatrice's acquaintance who refused responsibility. Mrs. Clark found herself destitute, facing ruin. What became of her? Helena asked, dreading the answer. I learned of her situation through Lord Henry, whose sister had taken her in temporarily, Arthur continued. I provided funds for her care during confinement and helped secure respectable employment with a widow in Kent afterward. Helena stared at him in growing amazement. You did this without any obligation to do so? I had the means to help, he replied simply. It seemed the only decent course. And the property deeds? The cottage belonged to Mrs. Clark's grandmother, but was sold to cover family debts. Lady Beatrice acquired it as part of a larger estate purchase. I have spent months negotiating its repurchase, to be held in trust for Mrs. Clark's child. He gestured to the portfolio. Those documents represent the final transfer. Emotion tightened Helena's throat as the full implication of his actions became clear. This was no recent attempt to impress her, but a long-standing commitment to justice that predated their relationship. You never mentioned any of this, she said softly. It wasn't mine to speak of, he replied. Mrs. Clark's situation required discretion, not advertisement of my involvement. Helena set the portfolio aside carefully, her heart full. I misjudged you terribly. No, Arthur countered, moving closer. You judged me based on the reputation I cultivated. I cannot fault you for that. Yet you have been proving that reputation false from the beginning, she realized. The hospital visits, your care for your tenants, this kindness to Mrs. Clark, these are not the actions of the man society believes you to be. Perhaps not, he agreed. But they are the actions of the man I wish to become, the man you inspire me to be. He took her hands gently in his. Helena, when I asked you to marry me, I did so with full understanding of my flaws and failings. I have been selfish, thoughtless, even cruel at times. I cannot erase that past, but I can promise you a future built on honesty, fidelity, and the deepest love a man is capable of feeling. Tears blurred her vision as she gazed up at him. "I believe you," she whispered. "With all my heart, I believe you." Arthur drew her into his arms, his embrace conveying what words could not: gratitude, relief, and boundless devotion. When their lips met, it was a reunion, a renewal of trust that transcended the doubts that had briefly separated them. A discreet cough from the doorway announced the arrival of Lord Henry, who took in the scene with poorly disguised satisfaction. "I see explanations have been made and accepted," he observed. "Thank heavens. I was growing quite weary of Arthur's melancholy." Helena laughed, wiping away happy tears. "You knew about Mrs. Clark all along." "Of course," Lord Henry replied. "Who do you think has been helping him secure those property deeds? Arthur may be reformed, my dear Miss Ashworth, but he still requires occasional guidance in matters of discretion." As the evening concluded with warm conversation and genuine camaraderie, Helena felt the last of her reservations dissolve. The man she would marry in 3 short weeks was indeed a work in progress, but his transformation was neither superficial nor temporary. It was the natural evolution of a good heart that had finally found its true purpose. The morning of Helena's wedding dawned with perfect June sunshine streaming through the windows of her childhood bedroom at the Ashworths' London townhouse. As her mother and sister helped her dress in a gown of ivory silk and Brussels lace, Helena's thoughts turned to the journey that had brought her to this day. "You look absolutely beautiful," Sophia sighed, arranging the delicate veil. "Like a fairy tale, Princess." "A fairy tale indeed," Lady Catherine agreed, blinking back uncharacteristic tears. "To think my daughter will be a duchess before the day is out." Helena smiled at their enthusiasm, though her own happiness stemmed from simpler certainties. Arthur's unwavering devotion, proven not through grand gestures, but through daily kindnesses and consistent honesty in the weeks since their reconciliation. "There is one final touch," Lady Catherine said, opening a velvet box to reveal a pearl and diamond tiara. "This belonged to your grandmother. She would be so proud to see you wear it today." As the exquisite heirloom was settled among her chestnut curls, Helena caught her reflection in the mirror, a woman transformed not by the finery she wore, but by the love she had found and the future she embraced. "It's time," Sir William announced from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. "The carriages are waiting." The journey to St. George's Church passed in a blur of anticipation. When they arrived, the magnificent edifice was filled to capacity with London's elite, all craning for a glimpse of the woman who had captured the Duke of Ashbourne's heart. At the altar stood Arthur, resplendent in formal attire, his expression one of barely contained awe, as Helena began her procession down the aisle on her father's arm. Their eyes locked across the distance, a private communion amidst the public spectacle. The ceremony itself was solemn yet joyful, traditional words infused with profound personal meaning. When Arthur spoke his vows, his voice rang with unwavering certainty. "With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, with all my worldly goods I thee endow." As the bishop pronounced them husband and wife, Arthur's kiss was both reverent and possessive, a promise of the partnership they now embarked upon together. The wedding breakfast at Ashbourne House was a lavish affair, the Duke's London residence transformed by flowers and music into a celebration worthy of a fairy tale. Yet, amid the splendor, it was the simple, human moments that Helena would remember most clearly: her father's emotional toast, Sophia's delighted laughter as she danced with Lord Henry, the quiet pride in Eleanor's eyes as she wished her cousin happiness. And throughout it all, Arthur's constant presence at her side, his hand seeking hers beneath the table, his gaze returning to her face with wonder, as though he could scarcely believe his good fortune. "Happy, your grace," he murmured, during a rare moment of relative privacy. "Perfectly so, your grace," Helena replied, savouring the new form of address, "though I confess I find myself eager for the festivities to conclude." A slow smile spread across his face. "As do I, my love, as do I." Their wedding journey took them first to Arthur's ancestral seat, Ashbourne Court in Derbyshire, a magnificent estate surrounded by rolling parkland and ancient woodlands. As their carriage approached along the elm-lined drive, Helena gasped at her first sight of the Palladian mansion glowing golden in the evening light. "Welcome home, Duchess," Arthur said softly, his eyes warm with pride and something deeper, the satisfaction of finally sharing his world with the woman he loved. The staff had assembled to greet their new mistress, led by the dignified housekeeper Mrs. Wilson, who had served the Fairmont family for 3 decades. Their genuine affection for Arthur touched Helena deeply, further evidence of the man behind the carefully crafted public persona. "They already adore you," Arthur observed later, as they dined privately in the small family dining room rather than the formal stateroom. "As does the entire village, if the flowers and well-wishes are any indication." "I've done nothing to earn such regard," Helena demurred. "You've made me happy," he replied simply. "For people who have known me since boyhood, that seems miracle enough." Their days at Ashbourne settled into a rhythm of quiet intimacy, punctuated by introductions to local gentry and explorations of the estate. Arthur proved an attentive guide, sharing childhood memories and future plans with equal enthusiasm. "I thought perhaps we might convert the East Wing into a school for tenants' children," he suggested one afternoon as they walked through underused portions of the great house. "With proper education, they might aspire beyond the limitations of their birth." "A wonderful idea," Helena agreed warmly, "and the old steward's cottage could serve as a clinic." Dr. Miller mentioned the difficulty many families face traveling to the village when illness strikes. Arthur regarded her with undisguised admiration. "You have taken to the role of Duchess with remarkable ease." "I've had an excellent teacher," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Your compassion for those in your care provides a template I am proud to follow." Their nights were a revelation of a different kind, a passionate education in the physical expression of love that left Helena breathless with discovery. Arthur proved as generous and attentive in the marriage bed as in all other aspects of their life together, his experience channeled entirely toward her pleasure. "I never imagined such happiness possible," he confessed one night, cradling her against his chest as moonlight spilled across their bed. "For so long I believed myself incapable of true connection, damaged beyond repair by my parents' example." Helena pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "We are not doomed to repeat the patterns of those who came before us. We choose our own path." "You chose for both of us," he replied softly. "Had you not seen beyond the facade I presented, had you not challenged me at every turn?" "You give me too much credit," she demurred. "The capacity for love was always within you, Arthur. It merely needed the right circumstances to flourish." He gathered her closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are the miracle I never thought to find, Helena Fairmont, the compass by which I will navigate the rest of my days." From Derbyshire, they journeyed to the Lake District, staying at a private cottage on the shores of Windermere. Here, away from the demands of society and duty, they discovered each other anew, hiking across fells, sailing on the lake, reading poetry aloud beside a crackling fire as summer rain pattered against the windows. It was during these idyllic weeks that Helena began to sense a subtle shift in her own body, a new sensitivity, a gentle fatigue in the afternoons, a peculiar aversion to the kippers that had previously been a breakfast favorite. When she confided her suspicions to Arthur, his reaction was everything she might have hoped: wonder, tender concern, and a fierce protectiveness that manifested in his insistence that she rest frequently and avoid anything remotely strenuous. "I am with child, my love, not made of porcelain," she laughed as he hovered anxiously while she descended a particularly steep path. "Indulge me," he pleaded, offering his arm. "I find I am not at all the cool, rational man I believed myself to be when it comes to your welfare, and that of our child." The transformation of the notorious rake into an attentive, sometimes overprotective husband might have amused society had they witnessed it. For Helena, it was simply further confirmation of the man she had always glimpsed beneath the cultivated facade. Their return to London for the little season in October coincided with the formal announcement of the Duchess of Ashbourne's interesting condition. Congratulations poured in from all quarters, some genuinely warm, others tinged with lingering disbelief at the Duke's apparent reformation. Lady Beatrice Fenton was conspicuously absent from society events, having departed for an extended stay with relatives in Bath shortly after the wedding. Lord Henry reported with poorly disguised satisfaction that her attempts to circulate malicious gossip about the Duke had been firmly rebuffed by even the most avid scandalmongers. "It seems your happiness has rendered you impervious to her spite," he observed during a small dinner at Ashbourne House. "London has collectively decided that the Duke's reformation is the romantic story of the decade. How fortunate that public opinion aligns with reality for once," Arthur replied dryly, his hand finding Helena's beneath the table. As winter settled over London, the Duke and Duchess established a routine that balanced social obligations with private contentment. Arthur's previously notorious gaming hells and gentlemen's clubs saw him only rarely now, as he preferred evenings at home with Helena, planning for their child's arrival and building the foundation of their shared life. "I received a letter from Mrs. Clark today," Helena mentioned one evening as they sat before the fire in their private sitting room. "The cottage is proving perfect for her needs, and little Emma thrives under her care." Arthur nodded, pleased but unsurprised. "She is a remarkable woman, resilient in the face of circumstances that would crush many." "She asked that I thank you again for your intervention," Helena continued, though she remains puzzled why a duke would concern himself with the welfare of a dismissed lady's maid. Perhaps because that duke was once a lonely boy, whose only kindness came from the household staff when his parents were otherwise occupied, Arthur replied quietly. "Mrs. Wilson, our housekeeper, was more mother to me than the Duchess ever managed to be." Helena reached for his hand, understanding dawning. "Your compassion stems from personal experience. Much of who I am, both the man you first met and the man I strive to be, was shaped by those early years," he acknowledged. "The facade of indifference, the fear of vulnerability, all defenses against wounds inflicted long before. And yet you found the courage to set those defenses aside," she said softly. His smile held a touch of self-deprecation. "Not courage so much as necessity. Loving you was not a choice, Helena. It was as inevitable as breathing." As the months passed and Helena's condition became more pronounced, Arthur's protective tendencies intensified. He insisted on accompanying her on even the briefest outings, scrutinized every meal for nutritional value, and consulted no fewer than 3 physicians to ensure she received the finest care available. "You're hovering again, my love," Helena observed one afternoon as she sat embroidering a tiny gown for their expected child. "I promise you, we are both perfectly well." Arthur smiled ruefully, caught in his vigilance. "Forgive me. I find I cannot help myself. The thought of anything happening to either of you." He left the sentence unfinished, but Helena understood the depth of his concern and its origins. "We are not your mother, Arthur. History will not repeat itself." The Duchess of Ashbourne had died in childbirth when Arthur was 10, attempting to deliver a son after multiple miscarriages. The tragedy had driven his father deeper into bitterness and dissipation, leaving young Arthur effectively orphaned despite his father's continued physical presence. "I know," he acknowledged, kneeling beside her chair to place a gentle hand on her rounded belly. "Intellectually, I know, but my heart refuses to be rational on the matter." Helena touched his cheek tenderly. "Then we shall simply have to prove your fears unfounded." As spring returned to London, the Duke and Duchess retreated to Ashbourne Court for the birth. The countryside in bloom provided a peaceful backdrop as they waited for their child's arrival, walking the gardens together and putting final touches on the nursery. Labour began on a perfect May morning, birds singing beyond the windows as the first pains woke Helena from sleep. Arthur, despite convention dictating that gentlemen await news far from the birthing chamber, refused to leave her side until the midwife and doctor physically ejected him from the room. "I shall be just outside the door," he promised, pressing a fervent kiss to her forehead. "Remember that I love you beyond all reason or measure." The hours that followed tested Helena's endurance as nothing in her privileged life had before. Yet with each contraction, each moment of pain, she found herself drawing on unexpected reserves of strength, bolstered by the knowledge of Arthur's anxious presence beyond the door and the child they had created together. As afternoon faded into evening, her efforts were rewarded with the lusty cry of a healthy son, a perfect red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair reminiscent of his father's. "Your Grace," the midwife called, opening the door to admit an ashen-faced Arthur. "For you have a son." He entered cautiously, his expression transforming from anxiety to wonder as he beheld Helena propped against pillows, their child cradled in her arms. "Helena," he breathed, crossing to the bedside. "Are you—" "We are both perfectly well," she assured him, shifting the bundle to offer him a better view. "Would you like to meet your son?" With trembling hands, Arthur accepted the infant, cradling him with instinctive care. As the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around his father's larger one, tears spilled unashamedly down Arthur's cheeks. "He's magnificent," he whispered. "Like his mother." "I was thinking he resembles his father," Helena countered softly, though hopefully with a less complicated path to happiness. Arthur looked up from their son's face, his expression transformed by a joy so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. "I would have it no other way, my love. Every step that brought me to this moment, even the misguided ones, I would take again without hesitation." They named him William Arthur Fairmont, honoring both Helena's father and his own heritage. The christening at the village church near Ashbourne Court was a joyous occasion, with Lord Henry standing as godfather and Sophia as godmother. "He'll be a heartbreaker like his father," Lord Henry predicted, watching Arthur cradle his son with unmistakable pride. "Perhaps," Helena replied, "but with a much shorter list of conquests, I should hope." The years that followed brought changes neither could have anticipated when they first met in that London ballroom. William was joined by a sister, Charlotte Elizabeth, 18 months later, followed by twins Edward and Emma in their 3rd year of marriage. Arthur proved as devoted a father as he was a husband, eschewing the distant parenting of his aristocratic peers for a hands-on approach that scandalized some and inspired others. He could be found racing wooden hoops with William across the lawn, teaching Charlotte to ride her pony, or reading bedtime stories to the twins with different voices for each character. Helena blossomed in her role as Duchess, establishing schools for tenants' children on all the Ashbourne estates, advocating for improved conditions in workhouses and hosting literary salons that became the talk of London. Her intelligence and compassion, once hidden behind the expectations of a debutante, now found full expression in the life she and Arthur built together. The Duke's transformation from notorious rake to devoted family man eventually faded from society's fascination, replaced by newer scandals and intrigues. Yet occasionally, when the Fairmonts attended a ball or state dinner, newcomers to London would express disbelief that this attentive husband was the same legendary seducer of seasons past. "It seems your reformation continues to astonish," Helena teased one evening as they returned home from such an event, comfortably settled in their carriage. Arthur's smile in the lamplight was reflective. "Not a reformation so much as a revelation," he corrected, taking her hand in his. "You didn't change me, Helena. You simply gave me the courage to be the man I was always capable of becoming." "Semantics," she replied fondly. "Perhaps," he conceded, "though I prefer to think of it as destiny. All those years of emptiness were merely preparation for recognizing you when you appeared." Helena leaned into his embrace, considering how differently their story might have unfolded had she not challenged him that first night, had she accepted the facade without seeking the truth beneath it. "When my family sent me to London to find a husband," she mused, "I never imagined the most dangerous game would lead to the greatest happiness. Life often delivers its most precious gifts disguised as its greatest challenges," Arthur replied, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Though in my case, the gift was far more than I deserved." "Love is never about deserving," Helena countered, turning to meet his gaze. "It's about recognizing, accepting and cherishing what we are fortunate enough to find." As their carriage turned into the courtyard of Ashbourne House, where 4 sleeping children awaited their return, Arthur's eyes held the same wonder that had illuminated them on their wedding day, and at the birth of each child, a man still marveling at the journey that had brought him from isolation to connection, from emptiness to fulfillment. "10 years ago," he said softly, "if someone had described this life to me, this happiness, I would have dismissed it as impossible fantasy." "And now?" Helena prompted, though she knew the answer. His smile held all the love and certainty that had grown between them, nurtured by trust, tested by challenges, and strengthened by shared joy. "Now I know it to be the only reality worth living, a truth more precious than any I could have imagined when you first walked into that ballroom and changed everything." As they ascended the steps of their home, hands linked in comfortable unity, Helena reflected on the transformation they had undergone together, from reluctant debutante and notorious duke to partners in the truest sense, each making the other more completely themselves through the alchemy of genuine love. The dangerous game that had begun with a waltz had evolved into something far more meaningful, a lifetime of growing together, of weathering storms and celebrating triumphs, of raising children who would carry forward the best of both their legacies. And in that shared journey lay the greatest victory of all, not conquest or surrender, but the mutual discovery of a love strong enough to redeem the past and illuminate the future with promise and possibility. 25 years later, a new London season commenced with its usual flurry of debuts, balls, and social machinations. Among the most anticipated events was the annual Ashbourne Ball, hosted by the Duke and Duchess, whose love story had become something of a legend among romantic souls. "Mother, you're fussing again," Charlotte Fairmont observed fondly, as Helena adjusted the diamond tiara in her daughter's dark hair, the same heirloom she herself had worn on her wedding day. "Everything is perfect as always." Helena stepped back to admire her middle child, now a composed young woman of 23. "Can you blame me for wanting everything to be special? It isn't every day one announces her daughter's engagement." Charlotte smiled, the expression reminiscent of her father's rare moments of unguarded joy. "Lord Bennet is hardly a surprise choice. We've been dancing around this outcome since childhood." "The best marriages often grow from friendship," Helena replied. "Your father and I were somewhat less conventional in our beginning." A deep chuckle from the doorway heralded Arthur's arrival. Though silver now threaded his once raven hair and lines of experience marked his face, he remained a striking figure, especially in the eyes of his wife. "Less conventional?" he queried, crossing to kiss Helena's cheek. "I believe scandalous was the term most commonly applied." "Ancient history," Helena dismissed, though her eyes warmed at his touch. "Charlotte cares only that we approve of her choice, which we do, most enthusiastically." "Indeed," Arthur agreed, offering his arm to his daughter, "though I maintain no man is quite good enough for any of my daughters." Charlotte took his arm with an affectionate smile. "Yet somehow, Lord Bennet managed to secure your blessing. A miracle, according to William." "Your brother exaggerates," Arthur protested. "I am not nearly so fearsome as he claims." The sound of laughter from the hallway suggested otherwise, as William, now a distinguished gentleman of 24 with his father's bearing and his mother's thoughtful nature, appeared with his wife and their infant son. "Father intimidating? Surely not," William teased. "He merely subjected poor Bennet to a 3-hour interrogation regarding his intentions, prospects, and moral character." "Prudent inquiries," Arthur defended, though his eyes twinkled. "Nothing compared to what your grandfather subjected me to." "With considerably more cause," Helena reminded him, earning a conceding nod from her husband. As they made their way downstairs to greet the first arriving guests, Helena observed her family with quiet pride. William, already showing promise in Parliament; Charlotte, soon to embark on married life; the twins, Edward and Emma, engaged in their respective pursuits of diplomatic service and medical study; and Arthur, whose transformation from notorious rake to respected statesman and devoted patriarch had long since ceased to astonish society. "You're looking particularly pleased with yourself this evening," Arthur murmured as they took their positions in the receiving line. "I was just thinking of how far we've come," she replied. "From that first dance to this moment. Grandparents, if you can believe it." His hand found hers, the gesture as natural as breathing after 25 years of marriage. "The greatest adventure of my life," he said softly, "and one that continues to reward me beyond all expectation." As the grand ballroom filled with guests, many remarked on the palpable affection between the Duke and Duchess, how they still sought each other across crowded rooms, still laughed at private jokes, still moved in unconscious harmony as though guided by some shared inner music. "They make marriage seem a destination worth pursuing," observed a young debutante to her companion as they watched the Duke lead his Duchess onto the floor for the first waltz. "A remarkable feat," her friend agreed, particularly given his notorious beginnings. Among those celebrating Charlotte's engagement was Lady Eleanor, now the contented wife of Sir Edward Bancroft, surrounded by their own brood of children. "Who would have imagined this outcome when we arrived for that first season?" she mused to Helena as they shared a quiet moment. "You were so determined to avoid the marriage mart entirely." Helena laughed, watching Arthur twirl Charlotte around the floor with practiced grace. "Life delights in confounding our expectations," she replied, "particularly when we're most certain of our path." Later, as midnight approached and the celebration continued unabated, Helena slipped away to the terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The gardens below were illuminated by strategically placed lanterns, creating pools of golden light amid the spring darkness. She sensed Arthur's approach before she heard him, their connection having deepened over the years into something that transcended ordinary awareness. "Escaping your own ball," he teased, joining her at the balustrade. "Savoring it," she corrected. "Every moment, every milestone, they pass so quickly." His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her against his side. "Not too quickly, I hope. We have many chapters yet to write, you and I." Helena turned within the circle of his embrace, studying the beloved face that had been her lodestar for 25 years. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I had not seen through your facade that first night? If I had been another in your long line of conquests?" "Never," he replied with absolute certainty. "You could never have been just another conquest, Helena. From the moment you challenged me, refused to simper or flatter, you were extraordinary. My only wonder is that you saw something worth redeeming in the man I was then." "I saw glimpses of the man you could be," she corrected. "The man you became, not through my influence, but through your own courage to change." He shook his head, smiling at their old fond disagreement. "We shall never settle this debate, it seems." "Perhaps not," she conceded. "But I believe we can agree on one thing." "And what is that, my Duchess?" he asked, his voice softening with the endearment. Helena raised her hand to his cheek, feeling the years of shared joy, shared sorrow, shared life beneath her palm. That what began as a dangerous game became the greatest blessing either of us could have imagined. Arthur turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, his eyes reflecting the same devotion that had sustained them through a quarter-century of marriage. "The only genuine blessing I have ever known," he agreed, "and one I shall treasure until my final breath." As they returned to the ballroom, rejoining the celebration of new beginnings against the backdrop of their own enduring love, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From reluctant debutante and reformed rake to partners in the truest sense, each made more completely themselves through the transformative power of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. In the end, the dangerous game that had begun with wounded pride and calculated seduction had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a love story written not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the quiet moments of everyday devotion, in challenges faced together, in the family they had created and nurtured, and in the legacy of genuine love they would leave behind. A legacy that continued to grow with each passing season, each new generation, each heart touched by the enduring truth that even the most guarded soul could be transformed by the courage to love and be loved in return. The end. Dear listener, as the echoes of Helena and Arthur's journey settle in your heart, I wonder if you've recognized something profound, how our lives, like theirs, unfold not in grand declarations, but in quiet moments of choice. At 60 or 80, we stand at crossroads still with paths yet untraveled. How remarkable that in the autumn of our years, when society expects our stories to wind down, we discover instead that the most transformative chapters often lie ahead. Like Arthur, who believed himself beyond redemption until love proved otherwise, perhaps you too have underestimated what remains possible. I've noticed that those with silver in their hair often speak of regret, not for what they did, but for the chances untaken, the words unspoken. Tonight, as you prepare for slumber, release that burden. The hourglass has not emptied. It simply reveals the gold that time has refined within you. The vulnerability that once seemed weakness now stands revealed as your greatest strength. The walls built through disappointment can still crumble, not through dramatic collapse, but through the gentle persistence of genuine connection, whether with old friends, estranged family, or perhaps someone new who sees the light still burning brightly behind your eyes. Tomorrow, when dawn paints your window, may you rise with the certainty that your most beautiful legacy isn't written in achievements or possessions, but in the courage to remain open to life's possibilities, especially when others have closed their books and set down their pens. Rest well knowing you are cherished for the fullness of your journey, every chapter essential, with the most moving passages perhaps still unwritten, with profound appreciation for your wisdom and continued adventure. Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If it touched your heart, even just a little, we kindly invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting our channel. Your love and encouragement keep us inspired to bring you more stories filled with romance, redemption, and powerful twists of fate. Don't forget, at the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another moving love story from our collection. Click it and let yourself be swept away once more.